The auctioneer snapped to control, and the silver collar around Vaelira's throat lit red. I stopped walking so suddenly a drunken traitor slammed into my shoulder and cursed me in 3 languages. I barely heard him. The slave market of Karen. 9 pulsed around me beneath strips of violet neon, all hydraulic hisses, electronic bidding tones, and boots scraping over black alloy flooring. The recycled air smelled of hot circuitry and industrial disinfectant. 20 feet ahead, beneath a white auction lamp, stood a woman I had watched die in my head for 3 years. Princess Vaelira Soryn. Her blue jade skin looked almost gray beneath the light, except for the thin silver markings running from her temples down her neck. They still glimmered when she breathed. Her white-violet hair had been cut unevenly above her shoulders. A restraint band circled each wrist, but her golden eyes were unchanged. I knew because I had spent 2 years watching those eyes scan diplomatic halls for threats while I stood 3 steps behind her. I had been her human bodyguard. Now strangers were bidding on her. Lot 73, the auctioneer announced. His voice boomed from ceiling speakers. Female elf. Educated. Multilingual. Verified high-caste genetics. High-caste. They knew exactly what she was and were careful not to say princess. My hand moved beneath my coat and closed around the grip of my sidearm. Cold polymer. Familiar texture. 1 pull. 6 guards before I reached the platform, another 4 covering the exits. Bad math. Vaelira lifted her head. Her gaze moved across the crowd, passed over a scarred mining broker, a pair of corporate buyers, then found me. Everything around us seemed to lose volume. She recognized me. I saw it in one tiny movement. The silver markings beside her left eye brightened, just once. Vaelira, I whispered. Her fingers tightened against the restraints. Then she did something worse than scream. She looked away. Opening bid, 40,000 crowns. A holographic number appeared above the platform. Someone bid immediately. 45, 50, 60. Each electronic chime felt like a hammer striking metal. I pushed through the crowd toward the registration terminal. A guard stepped into my path, armor servos whining softly. Registered bidders only. I pulled my identification chip from my pocket. Register me. His visor scanned my face. Species. Human. Occupation. I looked past him. The auctioneer had taken Vaelira by the arm and turned her toward the buyers as if displaying machinery. She resisted just enough to make his hand slip. Even chained, she stood straight. Former security contractor, I said. The guard inserted my chip. A green line crawled across his wrist display. Funds verified. 87,000 Terran credits. 1 Vanguard class courier registered to your name, military pension account, equipment bonds, everything. His helmet tilted toward me. Clarify. Authorize everything I own. This time Vaelira looked back. The auction light caught her golden eyes, and for half a second I saw the woman who once trusted me to stand between her and an entire galaxy. The bidding reached 70,000. I stepped onto the marked circle beneath the terminal. 87,000 credits. I called. Conversations died around me. The auctioneer smiled. 87,000 from the human. A new voice answered from the balcony above. 200,000. Heads turned. Behind polarized glass stood the silhouette of someone wearing military armor. Vaelira's collar changed from red to amber. Sold status pending. I stared upward, then at the restraints around her wrists. I had come to Karen, 9 following rumors of royal captives. I had expected another dead end. Instead, I had found the woman I once swore to protect being sold in front of me, and someone had just paid a fortune to make sure I couldn't buy her freedom. I released my pistol. Not because I was leaving, because suddenly a gun felt much too small. I leaned toward the bidding terminal and quietly asked, "Where does this station keep its slave control network?" The terminal answered with a warning tone instead of a map. "Restricted infrastructure," its synthetic voice said. I kept my palm against the cold glass while the auction floor shifted around me. Buyers moving toward the payment gates and security drones descending. From ceiling rails with soft electric clicks. White light washed over Vaelira's face. The amber collar at her throat blinked every 2 seconds. Sold status pending. Final transfer in 6 minutes, the auctioneer announced. 6 minutes before someone walked away owning the woman I had once sworn to protect. Vaelira was escorted from the platform toward a holding corridor. I moved with the crowd until a cargo loader crossed between us, its magnetic wheels whining against the deck. Then I slipped through an employees-only door. The service passage beyond was barely 4 feet wide. Pipes sweated condensation overhead, and warm air carrying the smell of ozone blew through grated vents. I pulled a maintenance key from my sleeve, something every former Royal Protection officer learned to carry because elegant buildings failed in ugly ways. The lock flashed red. I bridged 2 contacts with the edge of the key. Sparks snapped against my knuckles. Green. The door opened. I found Vaelira 40 yards down the corridor between 2 guards. Stop. My voice came out harder than I intended. Both guards turned. Vaelira didn't. One guard raised a shock baton. I stepped inside his reach, caught his wrist, drove his arm against the wall, and stripped the baton from his hand. The second reached for his sidearm. I threw the baton low. It struck his armored shin with a blue flash, locking his suit servos long enough for me to shove him into an empty restraint booth. No shots. No bodies. Just 12 seconds of violence measured in breath and machinery. I keyed both guards' armor into emergency lockdown and walked toward her. Vaelira. She finally faced me. Up close, the silver patterns beneath her skin were dimmer than I remembered. A thin abrasion crossed one restraint band where she had clearly been testing it. 3 years, she said. Her voice was quiet enough that I could hear coolant ticking through the pipes. I thought you were dead. That would have been convenient. I stopped 2 feet away. Look at me. Her golden eyes lifted. I went back. The words tasted like metal. After the evacuation, I went back to the palace. After. One word. Clean as a blade. The corridor. Disappeared for half a heartbeat, replaced by red emergency lights and the royal evacuation chamber 3 years earlier. Vaelira had shoved a civilian access key into my hand while alarms screamed through the palace. Hundreds were trapped below. Get them out, Elias. My duty is you. Your duty is whoever cannot protect themselves. Go. I had obeyed. By the time the last civilian shuttle cleared the palace perimeter, the royal wing was gone from our tactical network. No signal. No Vaelira. Nothing to recover except smoke and a list of missing names. The memory broke when her collar chirped. 5 minutes. You followed my order, she said. And you paid for it. I reached for her restraints. She stepped back. The movement stopped my hand in midair. Don't. I can remove those. And then what? Run to your ship while every door on this station locks. She raised her bound wrists between us. They control the collar remotely. Cross a security boundary and it disables my muscles. I looked at the amber light. That changed the problem. It did not change my answer. Then I disable the network first. Footsteps hammered behind the sealed door. Security had recovered faster than I expected. Vaelira stared at me for one long second, then moved close enough that only I could hear her. You failed at one thing, Elias. The door began vibrating under heavy impacts. You believed I needed you to disobey me. A crack appeared beside the locking mechanism. For minutes, I drew my pistol, removed its power cell, and dropped both pieces onto the floor. Vaelira's eyes narrowed. What are you doing? I pulled the maintenance key from my sleeve and turned toward the access panel feeding the station network. Finishing the job I should have finished 3 years ago. The security door buckled inward. I drove the key into the panel, and every light in the corridor died. Darkness lasted less than 3 seconds. Then emergency strips ignited along the floor, painting Vaelira's blue jade skin in narrow bands of red. The security door groaned behind us, metal flexing under another impact, while the access panel beneath my hands vibrated with the station's power cycle. Hot insulation stung my nose. Somewhere inside the wall, relays clicked like mechanical teeth. Elias. Vaelira's collar had returned to amber. You have perhaps 90 seconds before they isolate this corridor. Then I need 60. I stripped the casing from the panel and found 6 fiber trunks feeding the local security bus. I didn't need the entire slave control network yet. I needed leverage. My maintenance key opened a diagnostic port, and a maintenance display unfolded across the wall. Auction systems. Payment escrow. Asset transfer. I selected Vaelira's lot number. The screen demanded owner authorization. The armored silhouette upstairs had already deposited 200,000 crowns. I could not outbid that with credits. So I tried something simpler. I opened my own bidder profile and dragged every transferable asset into escrow. 87,000 Terran credits. Pension account. Equipment bonds. My Vanguard class courier. Even the emergency reserve I had kept untouched since leaving royal service. The total stopped well below 200,000. Vaelira watched the numbers climb. You're offering your ship? Apparently I'm terrible at retirement. You cannot buy my freedom by making yourself penniless. Watch me. The door buckled 6 inches inward. White sparks sprayed across the floor. I confirmed the bid. The terminal rejected it. Insufficient value. I added my registered weapons permits, navigation licenses, salvage contracts, anything the exchange recognized. Still rejected. Vaelira stepped beside me. Her shoulder almost touched mine. The restraints around her wrists gave a soft metallic scrape. Stop. I entered another authorization. No, Elias. No. Her fingers closed over my wrist. Cool skin. Steady pressure. I looked at her. 3 years ago, you ordered me to leave you because civilians needed me more. Her golden pupils narrowed under the red light. I obeyed once. The security door tore halfway from its track. Boots hit the other side. I turned back to the terminal and placed my final bond into escrow. The system processed for 2 long seconds. Then the auctioneer's voice crackled through the corridor speaker. Human bidder, Elias Vance. Your aggregate offer is declined. I froze. Not exceeded. Declined. The speaker hissed again. Lot 73 is not available to you. Vaelira's hand left my wrist. They never intended to let you win. I noticed. The door slammed open. For security officers entered with shock rifles raised. Blue targeting lasers crawled across my chest. I lifted both hands. My pistol was still disassembled on the floor behind us. The lead officer's armor smelled faintly of burned coolant. Step away from the property. Vaelira moved before I could. She placed herself between the rifle and me. I am not property. The officer aimed past her. Move. She didn't. Neither did I. A ceiling speaker chimed. 3 minutes until transfer completion. I looked through the open doorway toward the auction hall. Beyond the guards, the main display showed Vaelira's image beside a countdown. Below it, buyers drank and talked while waiting for ownership to change hands. 87,000 credits hadn't mattered. My ship hadn't mattered. Everything I owned hadn't mattered. Because this was never an auction. It was a delivery dressed up as commerce. I slowly lowered one hand toward the maintenance panel. For rifles tracked the movement. Don't, the officer said. Vaelira turned her head just enough to see me. The silver lines at her temple brightened once. I understood the look. She knew exactly what I was about to choose. I touched the panel. Elias Vance. The auctioneer said through the speaker, his voice suddenly stripped of amusement. Leave Karen, 9 now, and your interference will be forgotten. Continue, and you will be treated as an enemy of this station. The countdown reached 2 minutes. I looked at Vaelira's collar, then at the hundreds of locked ownership records glowing behind the diagnostic screen. I withdrew every credit from my failed bid, reclaimed my ship, reclaimed every bond. Then I transferred the entire amount into one account marked Network Access and Liberation Operations. The guards tightened their grips. Vaelira stared at the new authorization on the screen. I smiled without taking my eyes off the countdown. Good, I said. I was done being a customer. The first rifle fired blue, and I dropped beneath it before the pulse scorched the wall behind my head. I drove my shoulder into the nearest guard, shoved him sideways into the others, and slapped my maintenance key against the exposed panel. The corridor filled with the sharp smell of burned insulation. Red emergency strips flickered beneath our boots. Vaelira moved with me without waiting for an order. She hooked her restrained wrists around the second guard's rifle and forced the barrel toward the ceiling as another pulse cracked overhead. I reached the manual service lever and pulled. A blast door dropped between us and the security team with a metallic boom that shook dust from the pipes. 30 seconds, I said. Until what? Until they realize this door has another entrance. That was not reassuring. You used to hate reassuring bodyguards. I had one. He was exhausting. Her silver markings brightened faintly. I almost remembered how to breathe. Almost. Then her collar chimed. 90 seconds remained on the ownership transfer. I opened the station schematic on the maintenance display. The local auction server sat 1 level below us, protected by a biometric lock and enough encryption to keep ordinary thieves out. I wasn't an ordinary thief. I had spent years protecting a princess in palaces where assassination attempts arrived, disguised as software updates. We ran. The service ladder vibrated beneath my boots as we descended 20 feet. Heat rose from the server deck, carrying the dry metallic smell of cooling fans. Behind us, something heavy struck the blast door. Once, twice. We reached the lower compartment. A black cabinet stood behind reinforced glass, status lights pulsing green. Vaelira studied the access controls. Can you remove my collar from there? Yes. Then remove mine, and we leave. I looked through the glass at the server labels. Collar control. Ownership registry. Holding cells A through H. Hundreds of active signals blinked beneath Vaelira's identifier. No, I said. She turned. Elias. They made the same mistake I did. I placed my palm against the scanner. They thought this was only about you. The system rejected me. I pulled the authorization chip from my bidder badge and inserted it into the maintenance key. The scanner flashed amber. Buyer credentials met engineering access. Two systems that were never supposed to trust each other suddenly did. The lock clicked. Cold air spilled from the server chamber, smelling faintly of ozone. I stepped inside and connected the maintenance key directly to the auction bus. Vaelira's collar turned red. 60 seconds. The display offered one option for her individual restraint. Release Lot 73. My finger hovered over it. Then I backed out. What are you doing? I opened the master registry. Hundreds of names flooded the screen. Minors, refugees, debt prisoners, children listed as dependent assets. Vaelira went completely still beside me. 45 seconds. I selected every active ownership contract on Karen 9. Elias, if you trigger a station-wide release, security will classify this as an insurrection. Then they should have let me buy you. I routed my 87,000 credits into the station's transaction system, not as payment, but as thousands of simultaneous legal challenges against every pending transfer. The processor overloaded instantly. Auction screens across Karen 9 went white. Through the walls came a strange cascade of sounds, electronic alarms, magnetic locks disengaging, hundreds of collars chiming at once. Vaelira's restraint bands snapped open. Her collar went dark. Then every cell door on the registry changed from locked to released. The station speakers stuttered. The auctioneer's voice vanished. A new automated message replaced it. Ownership verification failed. All transfers suspended. Vaelira slowly removed the dead collar from her throat. She held it for a second, staring at the red crystal embedded in its center, then set it carefully on the server console. Not dropped. Set down. Like evidence. Behind the glass, security boots thundered onto the server deck. I disconnected the maintenance key. Vaelira caught my arm before I turned toward the door. You just made yourself an enemy of every buyer on this station. The first liberated cell block appeared green on the display. Then another. Then another. I looked at the woman I had come to save, standing unchained beside hundreds of newly opened doors. No, I said. I just gave them more enemies than me. The server room door began to open, and this time Vaelira stepped in front of me. Vaelira slammed the server room door shut before the first security officer could clear the frame. Her bare wrist struck the manual seal, and reinforced glass turned opaque between us and the corridor. A shock round hit the other side with a flat blue flash. The chamber smelled of cold metal and ozone, its cooling fans roaring hard enough to vibrate through my teeth. There's an extraction route 40 yards east, I said, pulling the maintenance key from the console. Freight lift, docking ring, my ship. Vaelira was already moving west. Wrong direction. Vaelira. She reached a ventilation hatch, pressed two fingers beneath the lower hinge, and found the recessed release without looking. The panel dropped open. Hot air rolled out carrying grease and dust. I stared at her. How did you know that was there? Because I was not unconscious for 3 years. She crawled inside. I followed because arguing with a princess while armed security cut through a door was something I had already learned not to do. The maintenance shaft narrowed to 3 feet. Amber utility lights strobed above us, while station alarms pulsed through the metal under my palms. Vaelira moved quickly despite the raw marks around her wrists. At the first junction, I reached left. She caught my sleeve. Right. My ship is left. And they know that. She turned right. I followed. Again. We emerged into an abandoned coolant gallery where pipes as thick as tree trunks disappeared into darkness. Condensation beaded across their steel surfaces. The temperature dropped fast, cold enough that my breath showed white. Vaelira knelt beside a rust-colored service plate, and began turning its mechanical lock. We need to leave, Karen 9. No, they'll seal the docking ring. Let them. The plate opened. Behind it sat an old maintenance terminal. Vaelira touched the screen, navigating dead menus with the confidence of someone returning to a room she had visited many times. I caught her hand. Enough. You're free. My job is getting you out. Her golden eyes dropped to my fingers around her wrist. I released her immediately. That, she said quietly, was always your mistake. Boots echoed somewhere inside the ventilation system behind us. I checked the passage. My mistake was leaving you. Your mistake was believing protection means deciding where I go. She opened a local transit map. Colored lines spread across the screen. Karen 9. Mining depots. Freight routes. Prison transfers. Slave convoys. She tapped locations one after another. I loaded cargo on Dock 12 for 7 months. I cleaned buyer rooms on Level 6. I spent 11 weeks processing manifests because they assumed a captive princess had become harmless. Her fingertips stopped on a chain of red markers stretching beyond the station. I memorized every route. The cooling pipes hummed around us. I looked at the map, then at her. How many? Thousands. A security drone dropped from the ventilation hatch. I grabbed Vaelira and pulled her behind a coolant manifold as its scanner swept the gallery. She reached across me, twisted a pressure valve, and released a burst of freezing vapor across the drone's optical array. Its rotor screamed. I caught it as it dropped, ripped out the transmitter, and set the machine silently on the deck. When the vapor cleared, Vaelira was already back at the terminal. She copied the route data onto my maintenance key. These locations move every few weeks, she said. If we run now, they disappear. If we stay, they capture you again. Then stop trying to rescue me like cargo. That landed harder than the security door had. I looked at the marks where her collar had rested. 3 years ago, I had stood behind her because that was where a bodyguard belonged. 10 minutes ago, I had broken an auction because I thought saving her meant carrying her to my ship. She placed the maintenance key in my palm and closed my fingers around it. You came back for me, Elias. I know what that cost you. The silver lines along her neck glowed softly in the amber light. But if you want to save me, save what I refuse to forget. The alarms changed. Pitch. Docking lockdown. My escape window was closing. I looked toward the route to my ship, then at the red markers glowing across the terminal. I holstered the useless remains of my pistol and handed Vaelira the maintenance key. You know their routes. She nodded. You know their procedures. Another nod. I stepped aside from the terminal. Then you lead. For the first time since I found her on the auction block, Vaelira moved ahead of me not as my assignment, not as someone's property, but by choice. I followed. Vaelira led me through a freight conduit and straight into a wall of bounty screens carrying my face. Every display on Karen 9 had turned the same ugly shade of yellow. My old service photograph stared down from the ceiling monitors. White human male, 36, gray eyes, former Royal Protection Officer. Beneath it pulsed a number large enough to buy a small moon. Wanted for terrorism, sabotage, theft of registered property, and mass unlawful release. The last charge almost made me laugh. Almost. Sirens rolled through the conduit, while hot ventilation air pushed the smell of machine oil and scorched wiring against us. Vaelira stopped beneath one screen. Registered property. Her fingers touched the bare skin where the collar had been. They mean me. They mean everyone we opened a door for. I checked the corridor ahead. My Vanguard was still docked 6 levels above, but every elevator had gone into security lock. Worse, the bounty was updating in real time. 300,000 crowns, Vaelira said. I was only worth 200. Try not to sound offended. The corner of her mouth moved. Then footsteps came from both ends of the passage. Bounty hunters, not station security. I knew the difference by the silence. Professionals didn't shout before closing distance. I pulled Vaelira behind a cargo brace and reached for the dead drone transmitter I had taken earlier. Stay here. Her hand closed around my sleeve. We discussed this. This time I'm asking. And I'm declining. 3 armored figures appeared through the red haze at the far junction. Another 2 behind us. Their weapons stayed lowered, but magnetic restraints hung from their belts. The tallest hunter called out, Vance. We only need the human. Vaelira looked at me. The silver lines along her temples brightened. Only you. Apparently, I've become collectible. Surrender him. The hunter said to her. Your auction transfer can still be honored. Cooperate, and you'll be returned intact. I felt Vaelira's fingers release my sleeve. She stepped into the center of the corridor. I moved after her. She raised one hand without looking back. Stop. The hunters relaxed slightly. Good choice, their leader said. Vaelira walked toward them. 10 feet. 8. 6. Then she reached up to the public bounty terminal mounted on the wall. What are you doing? He asked. Correcting your record. She pressed her palm to the identity scanner. The machine hesitated, then recognized Elith Royal biometrics that Karen 9's auction system had carefully avoided displaying. A soft tone sounded. Vaelira turned toward the nearest station camera. White light fell across the marks left by the collar. She did not hide them. My name is Vaelira Soryn. The hunters stopped moving. Princess of the Elith Royal line. Elias Vance did not steal me. He refused to purchase me. He broke the restraints placed upon me, and I chose to remain with him. I took one step toward her. Vaelira. No. She looked directly into the camera. For 3 years, others spoke while I was chained. They will not speak for me now. She touched the bounty display and transmitted her declaration across every public channel still connected to the auction network. Screens throughout the corridor flickered. My wanted notice remained, but beside it appeared her face. Free person. Royal identity verified. Voluntary association confirmed. The hunters exchanged glances. Their contract had just changed from recovering stolen property to abducting a recognized sentient royal witness on camera. Their leader's weapon lowered another inch. Vaelira stepped backward until she stood beside me. Not behind me. Beside me. You have your bounty, she told them. Take him, and you take me too. Princess, the leader warned. That human has just declared war on people who own fleets. Vaelira looked at the maintenance key in my hand, the one holding every route she had memorized during captivity. Then she looked at me. He has not declared war yet. Her hand closed over mine around the key. But I have. I started my war by shutting down a fuel pump. 6 hours after Karen 9, my Vanguard drifted dark beside a freight relay while Vaelira's stolen route map glowed across the cockpit glass. Blue starlight washed over her face. The cabin smelled of warm electronics and bitter recycled coffee, and the deck thrummed beneath my boots as maneuvering jets made tiny corrections. 3 slave transports were scheduled to refuel below us. You could destroy the depot, Vaelira said. Yes. You won't. I opened the maintenance key. Fuel burns. People are standing next to fuel. Her gold eye stayed on me. So what does a human bodyguard do when he decides to wage war? Paperwork. I transmitted 12 forged safety failures into the relay's automated inspection system. Valves closed. Pumps stopped. Docking clamps locked open. Every transport approaching the depot received the same message. Fuel service suspended. That delays them, Vaelira said. For 9 hours. I touched another control. This delays their money. Her route records included transaction codes she had memorized while processing manifests. I didn't steal the buyer's accounts. I froze them under competing ownership disputes, the same legal poison that had broken Karen 9's auction. Payment networks turned amber across the display. Vaelira leaned closer. And the collars? That's why we're here. We docked on the relay's maintenance side under a false service signature. The airlock opened with a hydraulic hiss. Cold industrial air struck my face, carrying lubricant and hot copper. Vaelira led me through a conduit she recognized from transport layouts, while I carried a tool case instead of a rifle. At the control junction, she counted 3 panels and pointed. That one. I removed the cover. Slave control beacons pulsed inside like red heartbeats. How long? She asked. 30 seconds. You always say that. Sometimes I'm right. She watched the corridor while I bridged the beacon controller into the maintenance key. A warning tone sounded. Then every red indicator went black. Somewhere beyond the bulkhead came the faint metallic chorus of restraint locks releasing. Vaelira closed her eyes for 1 second. Then she opened them. Next convoy. That became our rhythm. We did not attack crews. We attacked schedules. We corrupted docking permissions, stranded transports with empty fuel authorizations, broadcast collar release commands, and replaced locator beacons with false coordinates that sent recovery teams chasing ghosts across empty space. Vaelira knew where the system bent because she had survived inside it. I knew where machines failed because machines always assumed the person touching them wanted the system to keep working. We wanted the opposite. 2 days later, my face appeared on every commercial channel from Karen 9 to the Elias border. The bounty had doubled, then tripled. Human terrorist Elias Vance. Armed. Extremely dangerous. Vaelira read the notice from the co-pilot seat. Armed. She glanced at my empty holster. Technically insulting. Another transmission interrupted it. Grainy footage filled the windshield display. A mining transport sitting powerless in open space while dozens of freed captives crossed into civilian rescue ships. Then another clip. A disabled collar depot. Another. An auction house with its doors open. Someone had added a caption beneath the images. The human came back for his princess. I stared at it. Vaelira did too. That is not what happened, she said softly. No, the next message arrived encrypted through one of the liberated convoy frequencies. Then another. Then 20. Coordinates. Safe harbors. Volunteers offering fuel. Mechanics offering codes. Former captives reporting new transport routes. The war was spreading without anyone firing a shot. Vaelira touched one message and projected its coordinates between us. A massive convoy was assembling near the old Elith frontier. Hundreds of captive signals. More than anything we had hit before. I turned the Vanguard toward the jump corridor. Vaelira caught my wrist. Elias, that route is protected by warships. I engaged the drive. White light gathered beyond the cockpit glass. Then we stopped stealing people back one ship at a time. The convoy waiting beyond the jump corridor had enough captive signals to fill a city block with collars. My Vanguard dropped into normal space under immediate weapons lock, and the cockpit flooded with crimson targeting warnings. Ahead, 12 transport ships clustered around a black command carrier nearly a mile long. 4 warships guarded it. Their engines burned white against the stars, while the low vibration of our cooling system trembled through my seat. Vaelira leaned over the sensor display. 3,812 active restraint signals. A transmission forced itself onto our main screen. The man who appeared wore Elith court black with a silver chain across one shoulder. I knew that face. Regent Maelor had stood beside Vaelira's family before the coup. Now he sat beneath the crest of the government that replaced them. Vaelira stopped breathing for one beat. Maelor. His smile barely moved. Princess. I reached toward the transmitter. Vaelira caught my wrist. Let him speak. Maelor's image expanded across the glass. Your human has caused expensive inconvenience. He has a name, Vaelira said. I know his name. I placed the first order for his execution 3 years ago. The cabin seemed suddenly too quiet. You sold her, I said. Maelor looked at me for the first time. I removed a symbol. Killing royalty creates martyrs. Selling royalty creates shame. Vaelira's fingers tightened against the console until the silver markings along her hand brightened. Maelor continued. Return her, Vance. The transports leave untouched. Refuse, and their restraint systems remain linked to this carrier. A diagram appeared beside him. Thousands of collar signals tied into one master control. Human shields without anyone standing in front of a gun. Vaelira whispered. He wants you to choose. I already did. I opened our weapons panel. Maelor smiled. Then I powered every weapon down. Vaelira turned sharply. Elias. 4 warships. 1 carrier. Thousands of captives wired into its control system. I placed my maintenance key on the console. A gun doesn't solve that. Maelor's voice returned. You have 60 seconds. Vaelira reached for the transmitter. I will surrender. I caught her hand. No, if those people live, you taught me this part. Her golden eyes held mine. Protection doesn't mean deciding for someone else. Exactly. I released her hand and opened the communications array. So ask them. Ask whom? Everyone. I transmitted the carrier coordinates on every liberated frequency we had used since Karen 9. No command. No order. Just coordinates and one sentence. 3,812 people are still owned here. Maelor laughed softly. You expect refugees to fight warships? No, the countdown reached 30 seconds. Vaelira stood beside me, not behind me. The cockpit lights dimmed as I redirected power into communications and electronic countermeasures. 20 seconds. Nothing. 10. Maelor leaned closer to his camera. Your war ends here, human. Then space behind his carrier bent blue. One ship emerged from hyperspace. An old mining transport with patched armor. Then another. A civilian tug. A freighter. 2 rescue ships. 10 vessels became 30. 30 became 80. Their hulls carried burn marks, mismatched plating, hand-painted registry numbers. The ships we had released, repaired, delayed, redirected, or simply allowed to leave. None opened fire. They transmitted instead. Thousands of simultaneous ownership challenges hit Mailer's carrier network. Docking claims, rescue demands, collar release requests, evidence packets copied from Vaelira's records. The carrier's control grid flickered under the load. Mailer's smile vanished. Vaelira stared through the windshield as hundreds of ships emerged behind us, filling the darkness with navigation lights. "You built an army," she whispered. I shook my head. No, the first collar signal on our display went green. Then 50. Then 500. I opened doors. Mailer's master network collapsed beneath thousands of people choosing to hold those doors open for someone else. Vaelira reached across the console and activated a direct channel to his carrier. Her voice was quiet. "Regent Mailer." The last red collar signal turned green. "You wanted Elias to. Choose between saving me and saving them." Behind us, the freed ships formed a wall of light. "Now neither belongs to you." Mailer lost his kingdom before anyone fired a shot. Vaelira transmitted everything she had carried in memory for 3 years. The convoy routes, auction manifests, buyer registries, camp coordinates, payment codes, while I pushed the records through every civilian relay within range. The cockpit filled with pale blue data light. Cooling fans screamed beneath the deck, and the sharp smell of overheated circuitry mixed with old coffee as the Vanguard transmitted faster than it had ever been designed to. Across the formation, Mailer's warships began switching off their targeting systems. One captain opened a public channel. Then another. Nobody wanted to defend a regent whose signature now appeared beside thousands of trafficking orders. Mailer's command carrier tried to jump. I reached the docking network first. "You taught me this," I told Vaelira. I sent one command. Every liberated ship surrounding the carrier filed an emergency navigation objection simultaneously. The jump corridor locked under civilian collision protocols. Mailer's engines faded from white to dull orange. Trapped by paperwork. Vaelira almost smiled. Exhausting bodyguard. Former bodyguard. She looked at me for a second. "We will discuss that." 3 weeks later, I stood in the restored Royal Hall of Elith with my hands folded behind my back. Morning light poured through 60-foot crystal windows, catching dust in the air and turning Vaelira's silver markings bright as wire. The hall smelled of polished stone and fresh sealant. Half the western wall was still being repaired from the coup. There was no coronation crown on her head. She had refused it until the first law was signed. Representatives crowded the chamber. Former nobles, dock workers, freed captives, officers who had arrested Mailer after his own fleet abandoned him. Vaelira placed her hand against the legislative console. "Article 1, she said. Her voice carried without amplification. "No sentient being within Elith jurisdiction may be owned, sold, transferred as collateral, or bound through hereditary debt." The console chimed. Ratified. Across the hall, people began removing old ownership registries from the government archive. Outside the windows, ships once used for slave transport lifted from the Capitol docks carrying survivors home. I watched one rise until sunlight flashed across its patched hull. Vaelira stepped away from the console. Mailer would face a civilian tribunal using her evidence. His trafficking network had collapsed as accounts froze, camps opened, and buyers discovered that secrecy vanished faster than armies could move. No execution, no revenge ceremony, just records, witnesses, and doors that no longer locked from the outside. "Elias." I looked up. The hall had emptied enough for me to realize Vaelira was watching me from the center of the dais. I was standing 3 steps behind her, exactly where I had stood before the coup. She walked down 1 step. "You don't have to stand behind me anymore. Old habits are strange things. They survive explosions, funerals, even wars." My boots remained planted on the polished floor. Security positioning. "There are 12 guards in this room." 11. She glanced toward the eastern doorway. 1 guard had stepped out. "You are impossible." "I've heard that." Vaelira came closer. No collar. No restraints. No auction light bleaching the color from her skin. Just the quiet silver glow at her temples and those gold crescent pupils fixed on me. You came to Karen, 9 to save me, she said. I did. Then you spent everything you had. Temporarily. You challenged an industry. It was poorly designed. Her mouth curved. And when I refused to run, I looked through the windows at another former slave ship climbing into the clear blue sky. I learned to listen. She held out her hand. Not a royal command. Not an order from someone I was sworn to protect. Just an open hand between two people who had finally stopped deciding where the other belonged. I took it. Then I stepped forward until I stood beside her. Somewhere beyond the glass, engines thundered softly as another ship carried free people home. 3 years earlier, I had obeyed a princess and lost her. On Karen, 9, I had tried to buy her back and learned that freedom could never be purchased from the people who stole it. So I went to war, not to reclaim what was mine, because she had never been mine, but to destroy the system that claimed she could belong to anyone. Vaelira's fingers tightened once around mine as the last transport cleared the horizon. I had gone to war to save a princess. She taught me how to end it by making sure no one would ever need saving from ownership again.